Well, from the best episode to the least best. It felt like we were getting into a groove there for a minute with episode 3, but then this one happened and just spoiled the ride. This was such a weird episode, and I've got a lot to say about it, so hit the intro and let's get into this thing. Previously on X-Men, we had easily the darkest episode so far, and one with plenty of tantalizing hints for future stories. This week's episode was kind of the opposite, and also kind of not. And if that sounds strange, it's because this episode was f***ing strange. Writers, serious question. What did you think you were doing with this one exactly? I've been asking myself that since Wednesday, and I still can't figure it out. What happened here was that the show tried character spotlights for the first time. And yes, I said spotlights plural, because this isn't really one episode, it's more like 2 episodes that were crammed together. Or maybe 1.5 episodes would be more accurate. The first half of this was a self-contained story focusing on Jubilee, and the second half was a totally separate story focusing on Storm, but not the entire story, only part 1 of it. I guess they couldn't do the whole story because it had to share the runtime with the Jubilee segment, and to make it weirder, the 2 storylines weren't even running at the same time. No, it's one and then the other. The closest thing I could compare it to is the Tales of Ba Sing Se episode of ATLA, but that was designed to be a short story anthology type of thing, and it worked in that sense. Whereas this felt more like they just didn't have enough plot for the one story, so they threw another plot in there with it, and both of them ended up worse off because of it. From what I've seen, the reaction to this episode online has been middling compared to the first 3. People saying it's the weakest episode yet, the writers dropped the ball, blah blah. No, that's not what happened. The writers didn't drop the ball because they weren't carrying the ball in the first place. What happened was the problems that I've been pointing to and warning you guys about since the premiere just became a lot more noticeable. What hurt this episode is the same thing that I've been talking about for the last few weeks. Pacing. They try to do too much too fast, and along the way things get messy. I don't know why this keeps happening, but best guess, it's the episode count. Because the writers seem like they're in a really big rush to get to somewhere, but they've only got 10 episodes this season, which accounts for a lot if you think about it for a minute. The easiest way to fix both of these stories would have been to split them up. The Jubilee story should have been its own episode. The Storm story should have been its own episode. Try to do them both at once, and you get a rushed, incomplete version of each one. But you can't split them up because they've only got 10 episodes, and I guess there's too much other stuff to get through. So the first story takes place on Jubilee's 18th birthday. The X-Men are eating breakfast, Gambit makes Rogue some coffee, but Magneto beat him to it and even knows how much sugar she likes. Gross. And when Gambit tries to make a joke about this and order a cappuccino, Magneto reminds him that, luckily, I don't take orders around here, I give them. I swear I want to punch this geriatric motherfucker in his stupid smug face. You want to start with the creepy love triangle shit, writers? Okay, here we go. I put up with this last time because it showed us a side of Gambit's character that we hadn't seen before in the cartoons, but if it's just stuff like this and the story doesn't advance at all, my patience wears thin fast. And going back to what I said in an earlier video about some of the characters feeling a little bit off, Rogue does not seem like herself right now. Gambit and Magneto are revving up the engines to start their dick measuring contest, and Rogue is just staring down at her coffee with this pained expression on her face. And that's not Rogue's character. She's feistier than this. She's more hot-tempered than this. And just look at her in this scene. She's happy and smiling when Gambit's talking to her, but the second Magneto shows up, she looks miserable. We need to turn the page and shed some light on this thing already, because I really don't know what we're doing here. Now, some people have been saying that the Rogue Magneto thing is really just a misdirect, and I see where they're coming from. It is starting to feel like a misdirect, where the writers are trying hard to make us think in a certain direction without actually telling us anything new, but also leaving the door open to where it might not be what it looks like. Here's the thing though, I guess it is possible that it could just be Magneto teaching Rogue to control her powers. A lot of people have been guessing that one, or maybe it's a surrogate father-daughter type of thing, but if that's the case, why keep it a secret? I mean, clearly this history they have is something Rogue doesn't want the X-Men to know about, doesn't want Gambit to know about. You don't typically act that way if you're not doing something wrong. Why all the secrecy unless Rogue feels guilty about what she's doing here? here, or about whatever happened between them in the past. Or both. I don't know, but something about this is not adding up, and it's time to get to the bottom of it. Episode 5 looks like it's gonna focus on Gambit, so that's probably when this all comes to a head. And listen up, writers. In that episode, I'm gonna need Gambit to get more proactive. And I don't mean turn him into an asshole or anything, but Homeboy's been eating a shit sandwich for a couple weeks now. If he decides that he's tired of being jerked around and wants some honesty from Rogue about this Magneto situation, that's more than fair, because I like that Gambit hasn't flown off the handle about this yet. I think it's a good thing to explore his self-esteem issues. And yes, Gambit is canonically very devoted to Rogue. They are married in the comics after all, but there's a fine line between being in love and being a simp. Don't take it so far that you cut the man's balls off, okay? Gambit is not the guy who's just gonna sit there and let Magneto undermine him. And BT dubs, Rogue wouldn't put up with that shit either. Frankly, it's about time Rogue and Gambit both get their agency back. And I think it's awfully telling that that agency mysteriously disappeared the second Magneto showed up. And yes, damn it, I still think Magneto's working an angle here. In the Previously On segment this week, they showed the clip of Storm jumping in front of the Executioner's shot to protect him, and watch this carefully. Magneto's just standing there like a fucking statue, all stoic and shit, not flinching, not even trying to dodge the shot. It's almost as if he somehow knew it wasn't going to hit him. How is this not supposed to look suspicious as hell? Anyway, Scott and Jean are MIA this week, busy with stuff about Genosha joining the UN, so that's gonna be an ongoing story this season. And here's what I think is gonna happen with that. I think they're building up Genosha as some kind of safe haven for mutants. Magneto already sent the Morlocks there, remember? A place where they can finally live free of persecution by humans and stuff. So a whole lot of mutants will be gathered up there, and then the writers will take a page from Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, and that island is gonna get wiped off the fucking map. Maybe it's the Sentinels that do it, maybe it's something else, but Genosha is a fucking crater by the end of the season. That's my prediction. And if this supposed Magneto redemption is meant to be legit, I don't know how the hell it could be, but if it is, that's what pushes him back over the edge and he goes back to hating humanity. Because that will happen sooner or later. And if this doesn't do it, I don't know what the hell would. But holy shit, enough already. This is a Jubilee story, right? She's super excited, she's turning 18, our girl is a legal adult now. Do you feel old yet? She wants to have some fun on her birthday and hit up the arcade. Man, remember when arcades were a thing? I miss the 90s. But Magneto thinks Jubilee should spend her special day getting her ass chewed out in the danger room because fun is for suckers.
God, he's a bigger buzzkill than Buzz Killington.
Still sounds like more fun than my 18th birthday was. So Jubilee complains to Sunspot about Magneto being a putz, which I'm always down for. Then she notices a mysterious Sega Genesis-esque game console in her room, a Motendo, which springs to life and transports the two of them to somewhere else. They don't know where, but there's Sentinels and the Friends of Humanity, and everything is trying to kill them. Because Sunspot is f***ing useless, Jubilee has to drag him around like luggage to keep him alive while she does everything. And somebody must have been watching The Matrix while this episode was in production, because answering a phone in a phone booth gets them out of there and sends them to Genosha. But get this, it's the Genosha from that season 1 episode of the 90s cartoon. It's the scene at the dam that Trask was building. It even has some of the same cameos from that episode. Warpath, Domino, Blob, Sunfire. Holy shit, continuity! And it's not even my birthday! People start shooting at them again, but they're saved by some mysterious woman in a mask who kind of looks like a BDSM worker who moonlights at a Hot Topic. So it finally clicks for Jubilee that they're in the Matrix. Oops, I mean a video game. Only there are no red pills in sight. And this is confirmed when Mojo appears. Apparently, ratings are down in the Mojoverse lately, so he's pivoting to a new format to shake things up. And what better way to do that than putting Jubilee in a video game based on her own life? Of course. And if being into video games doesn't make Mojo cool enough to get him his very own Funko Pop, he even drops a reference to Sword Art Online to show that he's hip with the young people.
Howdy do, fellow kids.
And then we get actually a pretty fun sequence that's basically a giant love letter to that old school X-Men side-scrolling beat-em-up arcade game. It's aping the graphics, the music, everything. If you ever played that game as a kid, you got a kick out of this. I don't care who you are. They play through a bunch of levels that eventually wind up on Asteroid M, which has Jubilee complaining about Magneto again, and this somehow transitions into a commentary about Jubilee not wanting to grow up. And it's very awkward because it's the first time this has ever been mentioned, and the episode didn't even seem to be about that up until now. So it really feels like it comes out of left field. Then Jubilee does the final boss fight, which, fittingly, is Magneto.
I am Magneto, master of magnet.
She beats him all by herself because Sunspot sucks and wins an extra life using it to save Roberto for like the 10th time in the last 12 minutes. Magneto's not done yet though, but Jubilee and Sunspot are saved again by the mystery woman who turns out to be an older, alternate version of Jubilee who, fun fact, is played by Allison Court, the original Jubilee voice actress. So that's pretty cool. Apparently, older Jubilee is some kind of digital presence who was beta testing the Matrix for a long time until Mojo pulled the plug on that and then hacked her way into some place where she couldn't be deleted, because comic books. She gives young Jubilee the reality is real speech from Ready Player One. It's fun to hang out in here, but a video game isn't living and the real world is up, but there's good things about it too. And somehow, this makes Jubilee begrudgingly think that Magneto was right. What? No! How is that the moral of the story here? We didn't even know what the f***ing story was supposed to be about until this scene! Jubilee just wanted to play some video games on her birthday, and Magneto was all, no, you need to train to be a f***ing soldier instead. As if Jubilee hasn't been in tons of scrapes already, fighting Sentinels and Juggernaut and the Brotherhood, but now the episode's gotta twist itself into a pretzel just so Magneto can be right about something? For f***ing sake! I mean, if I'm right, then this is just the writers trying to lure the audience into a false sense of security with Magneto so they can pull the rug out from under us later, but the whole point of doing that is to be subtle about it. Maybe the writers were hungover the day they covered that in screenwriting class. So the three of them team up against Mojo. Sunspot finally makes himself useful for like 2 seconds, but it's really the Jubilees who do everything here. Mojo is beaten very easily, and Jubilee and Sunspot are transported back to the real world where they start making out and fall back onto Jubilee's bed amidst a bunch of fireworks that she generates because symbolism or some shit. Did they just imply that Jubilee is not gonna be a virgin in the next episode? Because we met Jubilee when she was 13. I'm a little uncomfortable with this. At least they waited until she was legal by the skin of her fucking teeth. Look, there was some fun to be had here. I like the visuals and the music and all the callbacks and Easter eggs, but this felt like filler. And doing this right after the super dark episode we got the week before didn't help. That was kind of jarring, actually. The story's supposed to be about Jubilee being afraid to grow up, but that was a really empty message because it had never even come up before until this episode, where it's only even mentioned twice, and then she easily gets over it in like 3 minutes. If they'd had the rest of the episode to work with, they could have expanded on this more and given us some actual context, but they didn't because we've got to move on to the Storm story now. And talk about a hard left turn, because this was about as different from the Jubilee story as you can get. And even though not that much actually happened here, they had me for most of this, because for the first time since the show began, the writers were finally easing off the gas pedal a bit. It just didn't stay that way for long. Storm is staying at Forge's place, and there are scenes of them eating dinner together, talking about their lives and how their powers work, getting to know each other, actually taking the time to let character moments breathe. There isn't much narrative thrust yet, but there is something happening, and it's playing out at a natural pace for a change. Also, more Easter eggs. In Forge's workshop, there's a picture of him with X-Factor, so at least they're not saying that didn't happen. There's also a picture of Forge with Dr. Adler from the 90s cartoon, and for eagle-eyed comics readers, Bastion. That might be something to watch out for. So Forge rigs up a science machine to restore Storm's powers, but it doesn't work. Storm is crushed, and then we find out that the technology used in the power inhibitor collars, and presumably the gun that depowered Storm in the first place, was based on Forge's original designs, which he cooked up for the DoD when he was going through a dark period, and that's partly why he's been so determined to help Storm. And it's also because he loves her. And that's where the story lost me. Everything had been good up to this point. There's a chemistry between these two, as opposed to Jubilee and Sunspot, who have none as far as I can see. But the point of this is that Storm is supposed to feel betrayed because there's this bond that had formed between them, this feeling of intimacy. And it doesn't work because the thing that really earns that is the one thing this story doesn't have. time. At this point, we've only been following them for like 6 minutes, and they've known each other for what? A weekend? Less than a weekend? This is why it needed a whole episode, or maybe a subplot that we checked in with over a few other episodes. We needed to spend more time with these people, show that they've been around each other for more than a cup of coffee. You can't throw an I heart emoji you out there after less time than it takes to boil spaghetti. No one's gonna buy that. I was glad when Storm slapped the taste out of his mouth, but not for the reason I was supposed to be. It doesn't play like he's sincere but she feels betrayed. It comes off like Forge is just spouting a bunch of bullshit. And then they're attacked by some bird demon creature thing. I thought it was the Shadow King at first. It had a similar vibe to it, but it calls itself the Adversary and it feeds on misery. Oh yeah? Go check out that love triangle shit with Magneto. There's plenty of misery over there. So it's some kind of psychic parasite, I guess. I'm not super familiar with this arc in the comics, but I know the Adversary did come into play there. But again, we're talking about a longer story that was allowed to unfold at a natural pace, whereas the show covers it in 8 minutes. There's just no way you're gonna get the same nuance when you do that. You're gonna get a heavily truncated retelling of those events, and likely not much else. I was with them up until the love confession, and then suddenly everything just kind of fell apart because, oh shit, we're almost at the half-hour mark, time to step on the gas again. This was such an awkward episode. The Jubilee plot was disposable, but could have been less disposable if they developed it more, and the Storm segment had a lot of promise, but that promise was broken just when it was getting interesting. And in both cases, it's the same damn problem. The writers can't seem to pace these things properly. I don't know why they thought cramming 2 stories into 1 episode would work, but all that did was hurt them because there wasn't enough time for either one to play out the way it needed to. Let's just write off Motendo/Life Death Part 1 as a failed experiment, okay? Go back to 1 story a week and just focus on making that work. We'll see how this not 2-part but 1.5-part Storm story turns out later, but for now, maybe it's best to just keep these things simple. So yeah, this was the weakest episode so far. Hopefully that's the outlier of the season and we get back to business in the next one, which looks like it'll be pretty eventful from what I've seen. I'll be covering that one too. Can't wait to talk about it with you guys. Thanks so much for watching. While you're here, ding that bell icon and follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. The links are down there. And don't forget to do all the other YouTube things. Hit that thumbs up, share the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you're still subscribed, and I'll be back with more real soon. See you next time.